of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. I hope that I'm audible perfectly. All right, thank you. It's a joy to be speaking to you, all this nice little group from Ireland, ICPF. My name is Asher, and I also have my brother Ashish. I hope he is also present here. And we are brothers, obviously, and we are part of this team called the Carpenter's Desk, a Christian apologetics team. And just a couple of weeks back, we connected with Jay's brother, and we just planned this and organized this series called Why Believe. And over the course of this series, what we intend to do is just share the evidences of the Christian faith to basically interact with you guys. I know that you guys are very smart, and all of these sessions would, some of the things that we will be discussing, you may have already heard in the past. So we look forward to have this through these sessions. We also look forward to learn from you, and I hope that this will be a great blessing in your lives. All of you guys who are, you can, who can turn on their video cameras, please do that. One of the challenges about speaking in the Zoom platform or the virtual platforms is that you don't, most often you're staring at yourself and speaking on the screen. So if you can turn on your video cameras, that would be great, so that I can also put a face to the names that I'm seeing here. So today we are starting the series called Why Believe, right? As the theme itself indicates, what is the reason to believe what you believe? In fact, there are so many beliefs out there. There are political beliefs, there are cultural beliefs, there are religious beliefs. And beliefs, when they come together, make or formulate your worldview, right? What is a worldview? Worldview is nothing but, if you can, decompose that word world and view, the way you view the world. Now, the way I see the world, or I see things around me, is through these glasses. That's how I perceive the world. Now, when you talk about a worldview is basically those set of beliefs through which you view not just the people around you, but also how you understand reality as a whole. How do you understand the universe that you're living in? Is it a creation, or is it just a random product of chance, matter, and time? How do you understand your fellow human beings? Are they worth equal dignity and respect as yourself? Are they or are they also just a pure outcome of chance? So when you look at all of reality, what is the lens through which you are actually viewing the world? And as Christians, the worldview through which we look at the world, we analyze the world, is the Christian worldview. Now the question is the Christian worldview true? Right? There is, just like you have the Christian worldview, there are several other worldviews. There are religious worldviews like Islam and Hinduism and pantheistic religions, right? Then there are non-theistic worldviews like atheism and secularism. So when you compare all of these worldviews, are you and I as Christians, are we actually believing what is true, right? Can you be confident that Christianity is, the claims of the Christian religion, the claims of the Christian worldview are worth holding to because they are true? So let's start by discussing what is truth. Can someone, before I even share my slides, what is truth? Any one of you? Can you have an answer to that question? Can you just define what truth is? Please feel free to unmute and speak. So the way we will be doing this, me and Ashish, we often go around giving talks and pulpit sermons, but the vision and the intention of the Carpenter's Desk is to actually speak to people like you, interact with you, and have a two-way conversation. So feel free to be very, put all your doubts on the table. So without any reservations, please feel free to interact and converse. Someone speaking? What is truth?
Which exists.
Which exists.
Which is existing.
Which is existing. Okay. Who is that? I couldn't see the face on the screen.
My name is Christy.
Sure, Christy. So it is what is existing. That's a good answer. So whatever exists is the truth. Okay. So let me just ask you a counter. 5 plus 5 is equal to 10, right? That's like a mathematical statement. Is that something that exists or
that exists?
That exists. Okay. 5 plus 5 equal to 10 exists. Fine. So now we'll be entering into interesting territories if we talk about the existence of mathematical abstract entities. That's an interesting. Any other answers? What is truth?
Something that can be proved, something that can be based, something that can be backed up with facts.
Something that can be proved is truth. Okay, so for example, let's go back 1,000 years, and you could not prove that that the sun was the center of the solar system. So people actually believed that the sun was going around the earth. So at that point, you cannot prove that particular statement. Would that mean that was not a truth back then?
You couldn't prove it back then. That's because of the lack of knowledge, but it was still there. And like when we discovered it, we finally found out it's the truth. So it was still there, but it was the lack of knowledge. They didn't know. So that doesn't mean that it's not the truth, right?
Fair enough. So yeah, I'm just the intention is to just get this conversation moving. So yeah, of course. So, but do you also think that all truths can be proven?
No, I don't think so, actually. Some truths, yeah, not everything, but I think the majority of depends on what it is, but it's very subjective, I think. But I think a lot of them can be backed up by facts, but there are certain things where you just like believe and you have to believe it's the truth.
Got it. So, okay, so let me just share my screen and let me know if you guys are able to see it. Can you please enable screen sharing? Okay, so while he does that, the person whom we follow, Jesus, claimed to be the truth when he said that I am the way, the truth, and the life. And that was, one of the most daring statements ever made in history. In fact, Jesus actually makes a very provocative, statement when he's speaking to Pontius Pilate in his final trial, and that has been described by some historians like Bill Durant, for example, as the most pivotal conversation in history between the Roman governor and this arrested, bound Jewish carpenter who is actually a nobody back then, but he comes and stands before this governor. And let me just share my screen. Let me know if you guys can see it. Can you just show a thumbs up if the screen is visible? Okay, all right. So when Jesus is standing before Pilate, and you will see this conversation recorded in the Gospel of John, chapter 18, verse 37 and 38. In fact, a few verses before that, to read the entire conversation. It's very interesting because here you have someone who is held and brought to the Roman governor for capital punishment. He is held for claiming to be, because he claimed to be the Messiah. He claimed to be the King of the Jews. And back then, crucifixion had to be the end of it. That was the most heinous form of punishment, one of the most heinous forms of punishment that history has known, where a person would be completely naked. In fact, the drawings and the paintings that we see of Jesus actually cover his nakedness, but the Romans actually crucified people completely naked on the cross. And Jesus was heavily, wounded, and he was flogged. And after that, he's brought to Pilate again, and you have this conversation in that setting. And Jesus very daringly says that, yes, I am a king, when he's asked that, are you a king? And then he goes on to say, for this purpose I was born, and for this purpose I came into the world, to bear witness to the truth, to bear witness to the truth. everyone who listens to the truth, or everyone who is of the truth listens to my voice. In response, Pilate asked a question, and the conversation comes to an end. So if you read John 18 verse 38, Pilate hears this. So here is this man who would, unknown to Pilate, and Pilate cannot foresee into the future, but this man is going to be the greatest influence in human history. 2000 years on, Pilate is, has been buried to the utmost depths of history textbooks, that no one actually knows who Pilate is, except for obviously people like us who know something about the Christian Gospels. But Pilate is just has faded into the books of history. But this man, whom Pilate will condemn to death on the cross, will for the next 2000 years be the greatest influencer that man has ever known. And he's standing right there and looks at the eye of the governor and tells that, for this purpose I was born. What purpose? You're actually going to condemn me to death? Yes. For this very purpose I was born. And I came to bear witness to the truth. And while he makes that statement, so Jesus is witnessing about himself. He's presenting himself as the truth to Pilate, and Pilate has a response to make. And a lot has been written about what Pilate actually says here. He says, what is truth? That is it. The conversation just comes to a full stop there. And then he walks away. He says, what is truth, and walks away. The historian that I just quoted, Will Durant, when he's talking about this particular conversation, he says that that was like a careless gesture. I mean, it's not very clear as to what was the mood of that conversation. What was the mood, or what was the intent behind that content, right? When he's saying what is truth, was he just, whatever, I don't care, what that was, what was that the attitude, or was it like inquisitive? What is truth? And he waited for an answer. Well, when you read that, it does not seem to be the case. It seems to be a very careless attitude. He says, what is truth? Whatever. And he just walks away. And when you look at our culture today, you will see that that is the very attitude that is resonant in the wider culture, be it in your college campuses, if some of you are actually working, if you go to your workplaces, you go to your schools, you will see that there is a whatever, I don't care attitude that you hear when you speak about truth. And when you think about it, truth is something that, based on something that, some of the greatest wars in history have been waged, right? There were men and women who gave their lives for whatever they held as truth. But now here in the 21st century, we just don't really care. Now, a couple of years back, I saw this YouTube short film called Alternative Math. Has anyone watched it? A show of hands? It's a beautiful little short movie about an elementary school teacher. In fact, in this Why Believe series, we've done this elsewhere as well. This is one of the pre-watch that we actually give. So, this elementary school teacher actually teaches this 5 or 6 year old kid that 2 plus 2 is equal to 4. And then she asks him again, so what is 2 plus 2? And he says, it's 22. And she says, no, it's not 22. It's 2 plus 2 is 4. So what is 2 plus 2? Again, he says, out of rage, he replies back, it's 22. Then she calls him to her, and she takes a bottle or a box of pens and picks up 2 pens. These are 2 pens. These are 2 pens. You bring them together. How many pens do you have? He says 22 pens. And he just, slaps away that box of pens from the table and just walks or just runs away. That that particular matter is brought to his parents. The parents are brought to the school the next day. The teacher speaks to these parents. Look, I had this conversation with your kid, and I just tried to explain to him 2 plus 2 is equal to 4, and he just got angry, and I hope that you can take care of it, and blah blah. And then the parents are like, wait, what did you say? 2 plus 2 is what? 2 plus 2 is 4. And the parents go like, who are you to force that on my kid? If he says 2 plus 2 is equal to 22, who are you to tell my child or to force your view of math. Someone said some time back that 5 plus 5 is 10 is actually true, and that exists. It actually goes to the area of philosophy of mathematics if we actually get there, but we won't. But we know that 2 plus 2 is equal to 4, or 5 plus 5 is equal to 10. So anyway, these parents just get very angry at the teacher, and they go on to abuse her and say that I'm going to raise it with the principal. So they go and speak to the principal, and the principal calls the teacher and say, and the teacher is like, I know that parents came to you, I don't know what's wrong with these people, and just things just went out of hand, and the parents also are behaving unlike I have seen in these parents meetings before. And the principal is like, but why? I mean, why are you forcing 2 plus 2 is equal to 4 on that kid? If he thinks that it's 2 plus 2 is equal to 22, and then this whole thing is, so it's a satirical movie. The whole thing is blown out of proportion. The teacher cannot come to the school. There are protests right outside the school gate. There are protesters screaming against the teacher. And finally, there is media that's gathered there, and the teacher has to stay indoors. Finally, the school decides to actually let her go. So she's called for one final time to discuss her final settlement, and to announce that, that as just as a virtue signaling, just to announce that the school has taken care of it. They have dealt with this teacher who is forcing her hate speech on the kids, and the teacher is also called to that final press conference. And while the media is there, the cameras are rolling, everyone is actually focusing on this particular final settlement. This principal calls up the teacher and says, so thank you for your service, madam so and so. This is your final settlement. 2,000 is so and so component of your salary. 2,000, another 2,000 is your earned leaves, and the so and so components of your salary together. So that is 4,000. She takes a pause and replies, well, that's not 4,000, that is 22,000. And the film just comes to an end. And you see the principal's jaw dropping. So, truth is relative, and truth is what you actually make it, unless you are at the receiving end of it. When we interact, or when we speak about, or when we actually engage with each other, we expect truth to be at the center of it. When we tell someone that, oh, that is not fair, or what you just did is not right, or that was my seat, I was sitting there, or so when you make such value judgments, and we do that every day, we are all assuming that there is a standard that we must adhere to, right? All of these statements that we casually make every day, we assume that there is something absolute that consciously or unconsciously we are all subjected to, that there is an absolute truth that is outside of ourselves, to which we have to adhere to. So anyway, moving forward now, pay attention in this particular session, and the next session might be a little bit of not technical, but some jargons or something, but we will obviously simplify it. And then when we get, the reason we are discussing these things right at the start is because as you go on, when we discuss, like, for example, the evidence, the historical evidence for the resurrection of Jesus Christ, or the exclusivity of Christianity, and those things are going to be very interesting, because then you're going to actually see empirical evidence, or what is the core facts of Christianity. That's going to come later, but before that there is some boring stuff, so we'll just quickly go through it. These are the 3 laws of thought, or the 3 laws of logic, as it is called. And although you are not philosophy students, you actually use it every single day. And these are the ones, right? The law of identity. And the example is from a famous poem. It's which goes like this: a rose is a rose is a rose is a rose. And what the law of identity simply states or conveys is that everything or every entity is identical to itself. Okay, every entity is identical to itself. Can you just, one of you, expand the formula, the simple one, the a plus b the whole square is equal to what? What is a plus b the whole square?
A plus a square plus 2ab plus b square.
Who is saying this?
Jay.
Huh?
Jay.
Oh, no. You were not supposed to give these answers because I thought the sound was familiar. Okay, it's a square plus 2ab plus b square. Okay. So guys, when you're in school, how do you actually go about proving this? Don't give me the, the proof of it. I'm not asking you to do that, but just how do you actually prove this particular statement just in one line or two? Don't give me the proof. Okay. And that's not what I'm asking. Any particular, like, X is equal to Y. If that's what you have to prove, what are you going to do? Oh man. Maybe when I say it, you'll remember. Anyone wants to try? Actually, no. I mean, it's no one. Absolutely none. Last call. How do you go about proving this? Okay, so just to refresh your memory, you will have two equations, right? You will start with the left-hand side of the equation, you will solve it, and then you will say that this is the equation number one. And then you will actually take the right-hand side of the equation, which is a square plus 2ab or whatever. Then you will solve, another set of equations, and you will arrive at some equation number two. And then you will say from equation 1 and 2, LHS or left-hand side is equal to right-hand side. That's how you used to do it, right? Am I speaking Latin, or is it something different in Ireland? In Ireland, that's not how math is taught. Okay. Okay, I'll just go ahead. So you start with, so if you have to prove that A is equal to C, you will show that A is equal to B, B is equal to C, and therefore A is equal to C. So that's when you do all of such, very commonsensical deductions. That is basically often using these laws of logic. And the example that I gave is law of identity. When you see that on the left-hand side and on the right-hand side of the equation, that is basically the one and the same thing, you will realize that those two entities are nothing but the same. So everything is identical. So the example that I gave is of math, but when we use language, and when I'm like referring to, let's say, Jay's brother, right? When I say Jay's brother, in your mind, you know whom I'm talking to, or whom I'm talking about. So not to confuse you, but whatever is in the language, whatever we are labeling as Jaysh, that is his name, we both, when I am saying it and when you are listening to it, you know that what is it being referred to, right? That is basically how the law of identity is actually very casually used every day. We may not actually be aware of these terms, but this is fundamental to our daily conversations and how we conduct ourselves every day. The second is the law of non-contradictions, which states that contradictory statements cannot be true. What if I say that the AC in my room is turned on? Okay, given that there is an AC in my room. Now, it can either be true or false. Can the AC be both on and off? No. By the virtue of it being on, then it actually means that it is not off, right? So two contradictory statements cannot be true at the same time. I can say that, okay, this coffee is hot, okay? And now the coffee is either hot, or is it it's not hot, right? It's maybe mildly warm or turning cold. So when I say any particular statement, there are only two options, that either that statement is true or that statement is false. That is basically the next one, the law of excluded middle. Okay, so contradictory statements cannot be true at the same time, and there are no other options in between, right? When I say that the AC is on, there are only two options: the AC is on or the AC is off. There is nothing in between. Maybe I can say that, well, I don't know, maybe it is on, but that is not a statement about the AC. That is a statement about my knowledge, right? Because let's say I don't know that whether the AC in your room is on or off. So I can say that maybe it is on or off, but that is my ignorance or my knowledge of it. The fact that the AC is on or off is independent of whether I know it or not. Okay. For example, the instance that I spoke about some time back, that 1,000 years back, when people thought that the sun is actually going around the earth, right? Even during that time, was the sun actually going around the earth? No, the earth was going around the sun. Although all the people of that time, they all believed that it was the other way around, and the evidence that was visible to them, because when they are looking up at the sky in the morning, they're actually seeing this ball or this mighty object in the sky called the sun going or moving. That's how it appeared to them. So they had visual evidence right in front of them that it was that it was the other way around, that the sun was actually going around the earth. Now, despite that, it was not the case, right? It was actually the earth was actually going around the sun. So what I mean to say here is that the ignorance of those people, or the lack of knowledge, or the knowledge that they had, would have no bearing on the truth of of that reality. So whether someone knows it or not, whether there is a knowledge or lack of it, that is, those statements are about us. Those statements are not about the reality itself. So the reality has only it can either be true or false, and there is nothing in middle. So keep these 3 points etched in your mind. You can actually go on reading after this session on the laws of thought. Just Google it, the laws of logic, and you can read further about it. But that is very fundamental, especially when you're talking to your friends on controversial topics like LGBTQ or abortion and all of these things. These things are very important. It's very important to know what the laws of logic are. I mean, it cannot be this and that. You'll either have to stay here or you'll have to stay here. You can't say both at the same time. So contradictory statements cannot be true at the same time. Just to give you one quick example, when these woke liberals, when they speak about feminism, or the kind of ultra feminism that is very common these days, they will actually speak think on, let's say, abortion. They will say that it's women, women, it's only people with, or it's only those with female reproductive system who have the right to speak about abortion. So what they actually imply there, that's a very famous slogan. What they actually imply there is that if you if you do not have the female reproductive system, then you are not a woman. But then these same people will turn around for a trans rights campaign, and they will say that, well, you don't need a female reproductive system to be a woman. You can, it's not necessary. So you see these two statements for two different campaigns. When you're putting this hat on to cheer for women's rights, and then you're putting the other hat on to cheer for trans rights, you're making contradictory statements. And those kind of two statements, which are actually flying at each other's face, cannot be true at the same time. So keep these laws of thought in your mind when you actually have conversations, and maybe going forward we will discuss these issues in more detail. So the very common views on truth that is out there, we will be actually tackling 3 such views. One is the view that we hold, and the other is the view that is very common, or the other 2 views that I will be discussing today is what is very common in the culture or the wider society that we engage with, and how we can analyze through it, and how we can actually defend our view. Just imagine that you are actually sitting in your college canteen, right? Someone just walks into that room or walks into that canteen, and you are sitting with your friends. You're actually chilling. You're having whatever is your snack in that part of the world, and someone just walks in and says, hey, you right there, XYZ, you believe that homosexuality is wrong? And suddenly there is a pin drop silence in the entire room. All your friends are like, oh, and this bigot, okay, he thinks that homosexuality is wrong. And everyone is staring at you right there. And you're right in the spot. All the conversation, all the noise has just settled down. They're all anticipating for what your response would be. What would your response be? Have you actually have you actually faced a situation like that? Do you know how to navigate through those situations and have a conversation without looking stupid or even like a bigot? So maybe this particular understanding what this truth relativism is will actually give you some pointers, and maybe in the Q&A time, if we have some time, we will discuss more. So truth is relative, or as the technical word is relativism, right? Truth is relative, meaning that there is what is the opposite of relative, guys? What is the opposite of relative? Anyone? Even if you don't know, just Google and tell me, please. No idea.
Absolute.
Absolute. Yeah, exactly. So it's the opposite of absolute. So what people who claim that truth is relative would actually state is that truth is not defined. It is not, absolute, but rather it is relative from person to person, right? It's personal preference. So each person can define his own truth. An example could be truth is like ice cream. You like vanilla, but I like chocolate, right? So it's a personal preference. You like, whatever is your favorite flavor, that is yours. My flavor or my preference is so and so, and that is how I like it. So there is no objective external standard to truth. Each person defines his or her own version of the truth. Okay. And one famous proponent of this in India, or even across the world, would be this Indian philosopher called J. Krishnamurti. And this is what he says: I maintain that truth is a pathless land. There is no path. I mean, Jesus said, I am the way, I am the path. I am the way, the truth, and the life. John 14, verse 6. But very right in contrast to what Jesus said, here J. Krishnamurti is saying that, well, truth, there is no path, there is no way, there is no single way to truth, or there is no single truth. Truth is rather a pathless land. There is no path, right? You often hear that all the roads, lead to the same God, or all the roads lead to Rome. And that's the context of that quote is very different, but that is often used also to talk about religion. It all finally leads to that one ultimate reality and things like that, blah, blah. So, I mean, people who talk about spirituality and all often throw these kind of quotes often. So, he says that I maintain that truth is a pathless land and you cannot approach it by any path whatsoever, by any religion, by any sect. That is my point of view. Notice this. That is my point of view. Okay, that is my point of view. And I adhere to that absolutely and unconditionally. So how can these two words come together, right? You can't say that it is my personal point of view. Truth is pathless. There is no absolute truth. And then you say that I'm going to adhere to it absolutely and unconditionally. So the problem for the relativist is that relativism is self-defeating, right? When a relativist says that truth is relative, he is insisting that that particular position, that truth is relative, is absolutely true. Okay, at least that one statement is absolutely true. I hope you're getting what I'm saying. To say that truth is relative is also a statement which is either true or false. That particular statement for the relativist, when he or she is making that statement, he or she is actually stating that the statement that truth is relative is absolute. Now that is contradictory, right? You can't say that truth is relative and at the same time also insist that truth is relative. Because if you're going to insist that truth is relative, you're at least insisting that one particular statement, truth is relative, is absolute. So that is self-defeating. Plus, the relativist believes that at least, pardon me for the spelling, the typo there, at least some truths or values are universal, including what it seeks to promote. So relativists also say that, the reason they are pushing for relativism is so that there is no, religious divisions, and relativism actually promotes tolerance, and we have people accepting all forms of religious ideas, and so they're actually promoting tolerance. So when they're doing that, let's say that it actually promotes tolerance. It does not, right? I'll come to that later if I have time, but in doing so, let's for the sake of the argument, let's assume that relativism will help in promoting tolerance. What they're assuming there is that tolerance, the virtue of tolerance, is objective, and that is absolute, and that is something that we should like, we all should promote. So intolerance is not morally good, but tolerance is, right? So they are actually insisting in at least one particular virtue is universal. Therefore, the denial of absolute truth requires a person to affirm it at the same time. There is no way out, right? Even when you're insisting that truth is relative, you are still insisting that you at least have to claim some exceptions to some particular statements or some particular values and take them to be absolutes. Now, quickly moving forward. So is truth a personal preference? I said I just gave you the example of ice cream, but look at this particular statement. I like banana. Now, this particular statement that I like banana is a statement not about the banana, not about the fruit, but it's a statement about myself, right? I'm stating my own preference. But consider another statement, a second statement, that bananas are good for digestion. Now, that particular statement is not a statement about me or you, right? Even if I do like or don't like banana, it's a statement about banana's own property, right? So this second statement is an objective statement, which means that it's the statement about the object. The first statement is a subjective statement where I am stating that I like so and so, or whatever is my personal preference. So it's a statement about my personal, or it's a statement about myself. It is subjective to me and can be different for you. Your taste and your preference can be different. But the thing that we are talking about, banana, its property is independent about me and you. It's independent from or what I or you like it or not. That wouldn't really matter. So when you think about moral truths, for example, the fact that murder or stealing or rape or any such uh, morally qualifiable actions, when we say that murder is wrong, right? That is irrespective of whether I or let's say a serial killer who finds pleasure in killing people, right? He prefers killing people. He's a psychopath. But that would not really have any bearing whatsoever on the fact that murder is wrong. I hope you're with me. So the quality of the action as either right or wrong, what you call ethics, has no bearing whatsoever on the preference of the person who is committing that particular act. In the next session, we will actually talk about what is called the moral argument for God's existence. And when we do that, I'll actually get to more details there. So finally, truth does not lie in the high eye of the beholder. In other words, truth is not subjective, rather it is objective. Subjective statements are merely statements of preference, but when you're talking about truth, it is irrespective of your knowledge, your lack of knowledge, your preference, your lack of preference, or whatever. Truth is truth, whether you like it or not. Okay, if for example, if Jesus said that he is the way, the truth, and the life, and someone just doesn't like that particular statement, okay, you don't like it, but guess what, that is true. I mean, if he actually rose from the dead, and we will actually look at that particular claim that Jesus made later on, whether a person likes Jesus or not, if he was the Son of God, and if he actually proved that he was, as someone said, one of the factors of truth is that it should be provable, it should be verifiable, right? And mind you, Christianity is the only worldview that has a verifiable claim. There is no other religious worldview that gives a claim that can be verified. There is no worldview. And when we talk about the resurrection of Jesus, I'll actually explain why. I mean, why no other worldview comes forward with any claim like the resurrection. Now, second view that I want to quickly tackle is the view that truth is plural, very similar to the view of relativism. It's called pluralism. Each and every view is equally valid. So as I said, it's very similar to relativism, but relativists would say that, okay, what is true for me is true for, it may not be true for you. But what pluralism would say is that all the statements are equally true, right? Each and every view is equally valid. So all religions are fundamentally the same. That is the basic claim of pluralism. Christianity, Islam, atheism, Buddhism, Hinduism, all these worldviews are fundamentally same. Keep the 3 laws of thought in your mind. We will apply it very soon. There will be a practical test coming up very soon. So what we hold as truths are products of our culture, origin, geography, etc. So one of the other factors that they often say is that, what, if you're born in India, you'll be a Hindu. If you're born in Pakistan, you'll be a Muslim. If you're born in the Europe, you may be a Christian. So the truths are a product of where you're born, in what family, in what culture you are born and raised. Now look at this particular comparison between Islam and Buddhism. Can you please tell me whether one of you can just look at this particular chart, and we are short on time, so silence would cost us time. very quickly, what laws of thought are you going to actually apply here to say that these two cannot be true at the same time? Anyone? What were the three laws of thought? Are you guys here? Am I audible? Okay, so can anyone quickly remind me what the three laws of logic are?
The law of identity, law of non-contradictions, and law of excluded middle.
Yeah, so which laws are being violated when you say that both these worldviews are true at the same time?
Contradiction or non-contradiction.
Exactly. So that is the application right here, and I hope that at least you guys are taking some form of notes when you're listening to these sessions as well, because it will let me tell you, I and my brother, the reason why we are doing this is because when we were in college, we have faced questions, and both of us have at some point in the past gone through a phase where we doubted Christianity, where we doubted the truth of our beliefs. And it is out of actually being in that college campus and being in those debates, and we both were participating. I'm just deviating from the session a bit just to give some personal testimony here, but we were both even as a team we used to represent our college in university debates, and so we were part of that debating community. And we had friends who were who would define who would who would be very different from the the moral atmosphere that we would uphold. For example, we had friends who were homosexuals, who were gender cures and whatnot. So when we used to discuss and debate with them, it was through those discussions, through those debates, that we eventually got going in apologetics. Although we loved this particular field, that goes back maybe to our school days, but we as Christians had a phase in during our college days where we doubted our own faith, right? And there, we had questions, and we had and that's exactly when we looked at the evidence, or went through the evidence. Particularly for me, it was the evidence for the resurrection of Jesus that actually confirmed me. And even now, with any skeptic, with any atheist, I'm totally willing. And in fact, back in Kerala, I don't know if you guys actually follow Malayalam much, but you will find a debate with me and one very popular atheist called Tommy Sebastian. I think he's based in Ireland actually, on the resurrection of Jesus. And even post that, now that debate is on YouTube, it's in Malayalam. Post that, we have been publicly challenging the skeptics down in Kerala for debating on that particular topic, because we are sure that if you're going to use the very method of history, right, that you use to defend any other claim, if you're going to use the very academic method, the case for resurrection is very strong. So I want you guys to actually pay attention in these sessions, make notes, because it's going to really help. And let me tell you one thing straightforward. If this is not true, then it is not worth living by. Okay, if Christianity is not true, if Jesus did not really come into the world, if he did not really die and resurrect on the third day, then whatever we believe is false. And that is not what I am saying. In 1 Corinthians chapter 15, Paul himself, someone who was very well decorated in terms of his his education, his social status back in that day, Paul, or Saul as he was formerly called, he came to Christ. He endured all the suffering. He became a martyr for Christ in the city of Rome. And that particular person writes in 1 Corinthians 15 that if Jesus did not rise from the dead, then we are miserable. I mean, that's if our preaching would be in vain, and so would your faith. So Christianity would crumble like a pack of cards. So I hope that these sessions, when you're hearing them, you will actually make notes of it, and also make it practical when you're conversing with your friends out there. So first it should convince you, and then you should go out convincing others. Anyway, so when you compare Islam and Buddhism, you will see that, look at the very fundamental claims, right? Islam claims that God is personal. Buddhism says he is not personal. Islam claims that God created the world. For Buddhism, world was not created, right? Man is sinful, man is not sinful. Man will spend eternity in heaven or hell. Man is not an enduring self. It's the the doctrine of reincarnation or rebirth that is dominant in Buddhism. Salvation is by faith and good works. On the other hand, in Buddhism, it is not salvation or it is not a salvation that is the ultimate aim. It is annihilation or the ultimate moksha, as they call it. So if you add more religions here, like you had Christianity there, you had Hinduism there, you will see that they're all making contradictory statements. So when you apply the law of non-contradiction, you can say one thing: either all of them are false, okay, or one of them is true. The option to say that all of them are equally true at the same time, you should definitely respect all religions, right? That is tolerance. The false definition of tolerance that is fed into our culture today is that you should accept all worldviews to be true at the same time. That is dumb. That is stupid. That is not consistent. That flies at the face of what we understood as a fundamental law of logic, law of thought. Contradictory statements cannot be true at the same time. 5 plus 5 is 10 and 5 plus 5 is 20 cannot be both true at the same time. If 5 plus 5 is equal to 10, then by virtue 5 plus 5 is equal to x, y, z, whatever you add there, all of those equations would be false by the fact that one of them is true, right? So one of them being true would actually falsify all the other theories that are postulated. And that is also the case in science, right? If there is a particular scientific phenomena that has to be explained, take for example the theory of atom, right? So to explain what an atom is, there are multiple theories that were postulated. There was the Rutherford's model. There was different theories that were actually postulated to explain what the atom was. But eventually, that theory which explains the phenomenon that it is trying to explain, the best is what stays. Everything else, by the virtue of its acceptance, get rejected. So just because you want to be tolerant, if you just apply that very woke culture or that very what do you call it, the wokeism to science, you would say that, oh, you know what, just bring in your theory, we will accept those theories as well. So that is not how science works, right? When you're doing science, you don't you want things to be precise, right? When you're actually taking a drug, you want to see what it actually says, whether it is poison or whether it can be consumed, and you actually believe what is written on the top of it. So when it comes to a matter of life and death, we all expect to be fed with truth. But when it comes to our comfort zones, and when I say about our, I mean the wider culture, it's often truth is tossed out of the window. So is truth a product of culture? Very quickly, if you were born in India, you would be a Hindu. If you're born in Pakistan, you would be a Muslim, and so on. So this is a very common claim that you often hear. What is being implied here is that our beliefs are a product of our culture or our time. Consider this. Okay, if you lived 1,000 years ago, the same example that I gave some time back. So if you were living about 1,000 years back, and that culture of the day actually believed that the sun was going around the earth, and that is the reason why you believed as well. But remember what I said, our knowledge or our lack of knowledge would have no bearing on the truth, right? That could be one reason why you actually, among other reasons, why that is the way you actually came to know about it. The persons around you told you that to be the case and you believed it, but that does not make that statement to be true. So truth is not a product of time. Or let's say you believe you lived somewhere in the interiors of Africa and you believed that cannibalism is morally right. But does that make cannibalism right? No, it would still be wrong. You lived, let's say, 2,000 years back when slavery was legal. Does that make slavery right? No. So this line of reasoning is called genetic fallacy. Note it down. You can read it up later as well. A very common fallacy that you often hear, that So what genetic fallacy is basically that, it's a fallacious way of reasoning that the truth or the falsehood of a claim is actually made to appear to depend on where it originated or how it originated, the cultural factors. So truth by definition would not have, in fact, that very statement is wrong, right? If you were born in India, I was born in India, most of you were born in India, or all of you were born in India, maybe some of you would have been born to Indian parents there, but does that mean that you're a Hindu? No. So where you're born, which geography, which culture, that has, obviously it might inform some of the knowledge that you hear, but each person has his own sentience, his own rational capacities to evaluate, opposing claims and arrive at what is true. Now, the pluralist would say that it is intolerant to claim that truth is exclusive. Now, as Christians, we tend to claim that truth is exclusive, that truth is objective, right? Jesus is the way, Jesus is the truth. So the usual retort that we hear from the culture is that, oh, what, what, that is intolerant, that is, you're being a bigot. Now this again comes a fallacy called ad hominem. Someone who's actually raising a charge like that is simply, even if, let's say, we are being intolerant, for the sake of the argument, we are not. I'll explain that maybe in the coming sessions. Even if you're being, so as I said, right, tolerance is respecting all worldviews, and you should definitely respect people with other views, and that is very, very, very important. Always talk with respect, always engage with respect. That is the biblical mandate. But you cannot accepting contradictory worldviews is simply ignorance. It's stupid, right? And it is not actually tolerance. So someone who says that you're being intolerant is actually committing this fallacy of ad hominem, where you are using the flawed character of the person who's making the claim to disprove the claim. Consider this example. An arrogant scientist came up with the cure, absolute cure for COVID-19. Would you reject his disease based on his character? Even if he's arrogant, even if he's intolerant, even if he is rude, his character does not have any bearing whatsoever on the truth or the falsity of what the claim or what the hypothesis is that he's presented. That is in and of itself. So when someone says that Christianity is true, even if you find that rude, the question is whether Christianity is true. It is not about the person who's making the claim, right? It is about whether that particular claim can be proved or not. If it cannot be proved, then irrespective of whether the person insists, you are free to discard it. As I said, it's also based on a false definition of tolerance. Again, sorry for the typo. It's it's based on the false definition of tolerance. So is truth knowable? Now, here are some quick pointers that will be helpful as we go on in the next session. Truth must correspond to reality. Whatever it is trying to explain, it should correspond to that. It's called the correspondence theory of truth. For a statement to be true, someone, when I initially asked, did mention that it has to be factual. So that is right. It has to be factual. It should not internally contradict. So, I'll give you some examples from other worldviews where there are internal contradiction. It says something here, it will contradict it somewhere else. So there are internal inconsistencies and contradictions. It must be livable, which means that it should have experiential relevance, and it should explain what it seeks to explain. So if it is seeking to explain some phenomena, some fact, some set of data, it should be able to explain that neatly. Back in the late 1960s, the Time magazine had an iconic cover. It's probably regarded as one of the greatest or one of the most iconic magazine covers of all time, which said, "Is God dead?" And that was in the 1960s. Okay, the 1960s, it's very important because this was post-Darwin, a couple of centuries after Darwin, the evolutionary theory came forward, and there was a lot of things happening in the culture. The culture was of that time. There were a lot of theories of human psychology that was being developed by Sigmund Freud, and there were so many philosophies out there. And eventually, in the 1940s and 1950s, even in philosophy, right, the field that discusses evidence or arguments for God's existence, atheism kind of had an upper hand. Okay, and in the 1960s, and now that is completely turned, it is the waves have completely turned around. And if you discuss today, the case for God's existence based on the sciences is stronger than the other way around. And we will obviously be discussing even the scientific arguments for God going forward. But so in that context, this Time magazine had an article by a philosopher called Quinton Smith, who kind of argued, not, I mean, I could be, my memory would not be serving me right there, but there was an article that argued that basically God is now out of the scope of discussion, and God is no more there. So the question that came in the cover was, is God dead? Right? Have we killed God? Right? Is God just dead? Guess what? Pause and move forward to the 20th century. This, I think, appeared in 2021 or 2020. In the very iconic style and font that was used for this particular cover, is God dead, in the 1960s, the Time magazine had this question on its cover: is truth dead? The consequence of eliminating God is that you end up eliminating truth. Maybe not now, maybe not tomorrow, but in the span of time, where there is no God, where there is no reference, where there is no standard, truth goes for a toss. One particular verse, and we will close, and that is Judges 21, verse 25, the final verse of the book of Judges. In those days, there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. Judges, the book of Judges, if you read that book very closely, the most pathetic human crimes that can be imagined, from heinous rapes, murders, all the most depraved, or the most wretched human activity is recorded in the book of Judges. It's pathetic. It's the same set of people that God delivered and brought into the land of Canaan. But in the book of Judges, you will see that things just go completely out of hand, and people are living in a moral mess. And when that book comes to an end, the author mentions the reason was there was no king in Israel. There was no reference. There was no standard. There was no lawgiver. There was no judge. I mean, judge in the sense that there was no absolute, arbitrator. There was no king in Israel. And what was the consequence? Everyone did what was right in his or her own eyes. If there is no moral lawgiver, if there is no ultimate authority, if there is no standard, if there is no reference, if there is no God, I'm actually taking further from that particular context. If there is no lawgiver, if there is no God, then morality becomes relative, truth becomes relative, each one becomes his own God. We see statements like my body, my choice, my life, my rules, right? I've seen that on t-shirts. Okay, all of that kind of arrogant statements, like the I am statements, right? That I am my own God, that arrogance that you see in most of your peers today, right? And that's very much evident in today's culture, is actually born out of the idea that God is dead. We can be our own gods. We can walk with our lanterns lit. The next session, we will look at an argument for God's existence, one philosophical argument, and then we will look at the scientific argument from biology, from cosmology, which Ashish will be taking. So how we are planning it in the next couple of weeks is that we will discuss the evidence for God's existence, and then we will move to the historical claims of Christianity. With that, again, thank you so much. I think we have just moved the clock slightly ahead.